Hey, Scarlett, welcome to the sisterhood.
Hi, Krista.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
2023. Here we come.
Crazy.
I know. Crazy. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I write books. I travel around and talk about them. I have three little girls, two rabbits that belong to those little girls that are very cute, and a husband. And we live in Southern California. And I like tacos, as does everyone.
Yeah.
Um, I don't, probably pretty boring with my day to day. Yeah, that's about it.
So fun. How old are your girls?
They are 11, 9, and 7.
Okay.
Super
Such
fun
fun
age.
ages. Oh my gosh.
So fun. They're like independent, but they still love to play together. And yeah,
Hmm.
it's great.
Oh, I love it. How did you get into writing?
Well, I can trace it back to third grade. It was kind of my one hobby and passion that I always loved. And when I was 9, I was like, I want to write books. I kind of had a one track mind, and it's a really long story, and I'll tell you as much of it as you want to know, but I basically was just always doing it since I was little. And like I said, I'm pretty boring, so I don't do many things. And that's just one of the things that I always did. And I tried to write fiction novels in my 20s, and I shopped them around, and the whole world of literary agents rejected me. And then Jesus changed my life, and I started writing about him.
Oh,
And
wow.
it just kind of, I mean, it was very cool that the Lord helped me learn the lesson that He's the only one who can fulfill and satisfy me before my writing dream came true, because I think I
Mm.
was looking to that for years and years to be like the thing that would make me happy. And it doesn't, because any dream come true that happens, you're still you with your same pains and
Mm.
problems. And I'm thankful that I learned that before it happened, because now it's just this thing I get to enjoy doing like I always have. Um, but I don't look to it as my identity or fulfillment.
Yeah, that's a good word for the beginning of the year
There you
as we're
go.
looking at our goals and the things we want to do and hope to do, to remember that we get to do them. That's fun. That's a bonus. And they don't define us.
Yeah. It's a hard lesson
Okay.
to learn.
I do have a question for you based on your bio that I was
Right.
reading. It said you grew up in the green room of SNL. Is
Yes.
that like really in the green room of SNL?
Yes. My
Okay,
mom
tell
was
us about
on,
that.
okay, my mom was part of the cast from 86 to 92, and I was born in 86.
No
So
way.
there you go.
What is
Okay.
her name?
Yeah.
Victoria Jackson. Victoria Jackson.
Oh my
My mom.
gosh. Oh my
Yep.
gosh.
Yeah, I know.
So you have this like blood running through you. That's comedy, right? And I also saw that you are studying stand-up
Well,
comedy.
can I tell you something funny about that? That's a
Yes.
joke.
Yes.
Okay, in my bio, as a joke, it says something like at the end that I study stand-up comedy with a passion that should be reserved for more important pursuits, or something like that. Um, yeah, I recently got asked if I would do stand-up because of that, and I'm like, I watch it on Netflix. I am a student of it in a fun, like, for a hobby.
Uh-huh.
I can't really imagine like going to an open mic night. But it is, yes, I have this comedy thread, which is so funny. You don't really realize how your childhood shapes you until you're older. And I like watching stand up. I grew up in the wings of stand up comedy clubs, because after
Mhm.
SNL, that's what my mom did. She traveled around the country, and I sat in the wings of smoky clubs and, was exposed to the world at this very young age. Um, and it's hard to find clean, good comedians,
Mhm.
but I have
Yeah.
I have a list if you ever want it. But anyway, yeah, I didn't even realize until the last few years, like, oh, duh, that's why I like it. Like, that's what I was around my whole life. And yeah, I love to read funny things, and I just, yeah, it's I had a weird childhood, and didn't really
Cool
appreciate it
though.
for how,
Like,
yes,
oh
very
my
cool.
gosh.
But
I
when you're
mean,
little,
come on, that's so cool.
you don't know
Yeah,
that it's
Yes,
cool.
that
You're
is
just
true.
like, you just kind
totally.
of, yes, you don't know that it's cool until you're 36,
Mhm.
and you're like, oh, that would be a cool thing to experience that I did not appreciate in the moment.
Are you an
Totally.
only child?
No, I have a sister.
Uh-huh.
She's my half sister technically, because my mom remarried when I was 5. Um, but yeah, we grew up together and I was a late
Okay.
bloomer. So we're very close.
Mhm.
So, how has comedy, do you feel like, played into kind of your coping with some of the harder things in life?
It's definitely, yeah, that is definitely a thing. Uh, I mean, I'd say it can go positive or negative. I definitely can retreat into, distraction, watch something light and fluffy, read something light and fluffy to try to escape the pain of the world. I've done that. It doesn't work because, um, you feel happy for a second, but it doesn't give you the true peace that surpasses understanding that we all long for every day. That is hard to fight for sometimes because we still live in this broken world. Um,
Mm,
so yes, I've definitely been there, but I also think it's been very helpful in my life. I think it's made me pretty resilient. Um, that's just always been a thread. My childhood was it was kind of crazy. It's very cool. It sounds very cool, but behind the scenes, I'm traveling all the time. My parents get divorced. I'm like, oh, dads and homes can go away, and now we're suddenly in Miami, and my new dad is a SWAT guy getting his pinky shot off, and it's like it's a comedy, but it's also like
mhm,
as the little kid in it, I was very confused. Seeing I was being taught about Jesus since I was born. I was raised in a Christian home, but it was a unique home where, I'm in the wings at comedy clubs, hearing and seeing a lot of darkness. And so, I think that I'm grateful that laughter has always been a thread in in my life and in my home. And I definitely think that that's carried over into my current, family unit. Yeah, I think that, whether it's positive or negative, if we just set our mind on things above. Colossians 3:2 is always what I'm reminding myself of. Then the Lord will help us laugh things off, like the Proverbs 31 description, laugh at things to come because our hope is secure. But also not run to laughter as the thing that will comfort us. So I don't know.
mm.
I'm still learning.
It's
No,
really
that's
good.
good. Yeah, it's really good because I think we generally think of laughter as a good thing. It lightens the mood and things are heavy. But you're right, anything can be used as an escape and a coping mechanism that keeps us from dealing with the underlying stuff that's really there. And so, as we're all heading into the new year, to kind of examine those things about us that what are my coping mechanisms and how healthy are they? And are they keeping me from dealing with the things I really need to be dealing with? And humor fits into that, uh, just like any other thing that might be a little bit more obvious
Yeah.
does. So interesting. Okay, let's talk about your most recent book. It has a unique title. I'm not kidding. My 13-year-old saw me looking at it last night and she said, well, that's a strong title. So the title is You're the Worst Person in the World. Tell us about choosing that title for your book and
Okay.
what it's about.
Was it a good decision to title it that? I don't know. I fought for it with my publisher who wanted to
Uh-huh.
change
Good,
it.
good. As
Um,
you should.
well, and thank you, wonderful publisher, for letting me have that title. Here's what happened. In most cases, and with my other books, the idea came before the title. Like my 11-year-old who's writing papers now in sixth grade. It's like you write the thing and then you come up with the title once see what you've got. In this case, the title came before the idea because
Mm,
my first book's called Afraid of All the Things. And that's like my memoir testimony, um, learning to fight, you know, learning to stop being a slave to the panic that I grew up with, that I told you a little bit about, and fight for resting in the gospel, learning that it's possible to rest in the gospel. So that's the first book. And when it was coming out, again, I told you guys already, like my dream was to write a book. So my closest friend Katie was all excited with me about, oh, I get to, you know, choose the book cover and the colors and work with the designer and my ideas and stuff. So it was super fun. And I had all these I had all these cover ideas and swatches and colors for Afraid of All the Things, which is the tone is supposed to be lighthearted and funny, but it's tackling this more serious topic of anxiety and panic. And so I wanted the cover to convey that it was humorous, that it wasn't like afraid, scary. And
Mhm.
so I'm showing the covers to my friend Katie, and one of them was this dark red color. And I was like, what do you think of this one? She said, honestly, I love you. I'm so excited. It's your first book. It's a little scary. There are fangs and a syringe on the cover, which I love. And I think that's so funny. But she's like, with the dark red and the fangs, it's a little bit much, a little bit scary. And then she said, but honestly, Scarlett, I'm so excited. If you just had a blank white book and it's just said you're the worst person in the world, I'd still be so excited. And I thought that was so funny. I laughed and I thought, a Christian book on a coffee table, like you said your daughter, Alex or Alexandra. Do you go by Alex or
Yeah,
Alexandra?
Alex is good.
Okay, Alex.
Yeah.
Like your daughter said, I just thought that would be really funny. And so I was like, Katie, that's got to be a book someday. So this was back in like 2017, 2018. And of course I thought about it. And then I thought, okay, so I've written about my testimony, which anxiety is and fear is such a thread. But along those lines as well, like all that anxiety led me to strive for accomplishments and perfection, to be loved and approved by people, to be loved and approved by God. I kind of had this upside down Christianity where I became a Christian when I was 14, but the way I lived was very works based. Like,
Mhm.
okay, I think that I'm going to heaven, but I better do a really good job of being a Christian for God to be happy with me, just missing the whole point of the good news of the gospel, which is that God is happy with me because of what Jesus did. And my job is to worship him and point people to him, not to do things to make people look at me. So I didn't really have that yet, but that's a huge part of my testimony. So I thought, okay, you're the worst person in the world could be a book of stories of all of my failures and all of my striving, ultimately pointing to we've got to get to that point of acknowledging our sin, but then we've got to repent and give it to the Lord and live with peace and joy. Like that's the benefit of being a Christian while we're alive, before the hope of forever wonderfulness. We can have abundant life today. And that's what I missed out on for years because I was so busy trying to make myself look awesome, So the subtitle is why it's the best news ever that you don't have it together. You aren't enough and you can't fix it on your own. That explains the title. And that was our compromise, me and the publisher. I was like, can I please have this title? And they're like, if there's a subtitle explaining what you're saying, like, okay.
Well, and I love that concept because essentially what you're saying is in our striving to be perfect, which there's really no such thing. It's just so strange that we even strive for it because there is no such thing. But in our striving towards that, we actually set ourselves up to be disappointed and to be let down. And yet, if we just would flip that, we actually would do so much better, both in our mental state and probably also in our actions. So talk to us a little bit about what that does when we are striving in that way and how that sets us up for failure, actually.
Well, I think it's something we all have to fight all the time, no matter how long we've been walking with the Lord. I never share from or even live from a place of like, okay, I've got this, because as soon as I do that, then I'm doing it again. Like if it's in your faith, if it's in your parenting, whatever it is, as soon as you feel like, okay, I have a grasp on things, then your humility turns to pride. It's so sneaky and it's happened to me so many times. And I mean, it may be happening to me right now. It's like, I remember we adopted our middle daughter from China. She had really severe special needs 5 years ago. And it was the most amazing God high, like to be in this process, this hard and scary and daunting process of this adoption. And I just remember, like me and my husband still say we're jealous for that time of life because the supernatural ways the Lord provided and comforted us and just assured us that he was with us. It was like no other time in our lives. But I remember being in China and meeting Joy, and she was so sick and it looked so hopeless. When we got there, it was kind of like medically the worst case scenario. We hoped she would be, you don't know much when you walk into these things. And I just remember being hit with, oh, wow, I think I've been really prideful for like the last 6 months. Even in the name of this mission that God's called us to, I've been kind of like watching the training videos that say it's going to be hard. It's really going to be hard. No, it's really going to be hard. Okay. And me thinking in the back of my mind, okay, but I'm going to love her, and God's called us to this. And I just kind of switched from trusting God to trusting that I was loving and good enough to fix all the problems with my love, you know? And so of course the beauty of walking, oh, sorry. um, sorry. So of course the beauty of walking with the Lord is that he exposed that while I was hiding in our hotel room in China under a white comforter, because there was no place to hide. Like there was a glass window in the bathroom in the hotel. Like there was no place to hide with my emotions. And I just remember the Lord kindly showing me that I'd been the opposite of humble, thinking, you know, so it's one of those things. And of course, the end of that story is he comforted me and he gave me what I needed, and he sustained me, and he took my fear away because I was dependent on him. You know, what is that verse? He will keep the mind in perfect peace, the mind that is dependent on him. I'm saying it wrong, but you know, it's just true and it's real. And I have a million of those stories where it's like I just did not see my own pride until I was just, you know, floundering and freaking out. And then the Lord exposed it and helped me set my mind back on him. So I think I lost track of your question. I'm so
You know,
sorry.
it's interesting though. I was thinking while you were talking, you know, so how do we recognize it? What are some of the benchmarks that we can say, okay, I think I need to reset here?
Yeah. I think that they are just the basics of what Jesus tells us to do in his word, you know, be in his word, be in Christian community. I think that's a huge one. Like have people in your life that are also pursuing the Lord. That's hard for me. Like, you know, committing to a small group at church. That's a hard thing to have people in your life that are close up enough to be able to say the hard things to you. Nobody likes that. We all want to, we know we can look at each other right now and say, I know I can't be perfect, but we all want to do a good job. And I think that that's, I mean, it's a beautiful thing that we want to please the Lord and that we want to love our families well. It's a good thing. I think it's just, you know, I tell my more perfectionist leaning daughter all the time who struggles with this, that if we always felt like we were doing awesome, we would not see our need for Jesus. And so it's not fun to when these blind spots are exposed. But I can just look back at the ones that are further away, of course. And every time I am so grateful, you know, that my sin is exposed, because then I can live in the light and I don't have to have shame and panic, you know? So I think I think reading the Bible and doing what it says is the simplest answer, because I think that it's really, it's scary to do what it says because it sounds so radical to live the way that Jesus told us to live. But then when we do, that's when we experience peace because we're doing what we were made to do, you know?
Mm-hmm. My pastor was just over yesterday, and she was telling me about a family at our church that had welcomed a family in for about a month into their home. And she said, I mean, like, who does that?
Yeah.
And yet that's what we're supposed to do. And
Right.
we were just amazed at how, when you actually live out the life that God has called you to, it's so amazing to everyone around you because it is so unusual, even within the church, for people to really live out their faith. And then it's countercultural, but it's even countercultural within the church, which is hard to swallow. You know, we not only carry that pride for ourselves, we carry it for our communities that we're part of. Like, oh, our church is doing it well, or we as the body of believers are living life more fruitfully, when sometimes we need to take a little bit of honesty medicine and say, oh, maybe we have a lot of room for improvement here.
Yeah. I think something that comforts me when I think about that is just that God does give us joy in what he calls us to. And what he calls us to is it's the same mission, but he gives everybody different parts. You know, Paul writes about is it Corinthians, one of the Corinthians or Ephesians? I don't know. I'm working on my references, you guys. But, you know, it's like with Joy, our adoption, we knew we were called to her, and I had that peace, and that was real peace. And yes, my pride got mixed in somewhere along the way, and I repented and turned from it and experienced peace and joy again. But it's like during that time, there were other people in my life doing foster care and other non-related, you know, acts of service, working with troubled youth in the, inner city. Like I had different friends doing different things that did not look doable or appealing to me in that moment. But they, just like you said, they looked at my life and thought, who does that? Like, how are you, adopting a daughter with special needs? It's not a baby. It was like, honestly, today I look at that and think, could I do that today? I don't know. Like, I don't feel the call or the, I think that God gives us specific callings. I think that he heard the cries of joy in Tianjin, China, and he gave me a desire to go adopt her. And I think
Mhm.
he does it over and over again. I pray that he keeps doing that in my life, because I don't want to just have this one thing and this one season of life, but yeah, I think that there's comfort in that. And I also think that if you get too focused in on we're not doing good enough, like we can never do good. We can't, and that's the whole point of the gospel. And I think that's where I would get tripped up before, in my first decade of Christianity. And I can still go there, of course, but just thinking, if you sell all you have, well, then why aren't you moving to Afghanistan? Well, if you're in Afghanistan, why aren't you, it's like there's never an enough line of
Mhm.
serving the Lord. And I think that, we can either swing in the pendulum to be like, okay, grace, and then be that person that Apostle Paul says, does this mean we should go on sinning because grace abounds? By no means. Like we can just kind of shut out the pain of the world and not serve the Lord because we're like, oh, our sins are covered. And that's not how we're supposed to live either. But I think if we just focus on the gospel, which is so simple and we complicate it so much, but if we just focus on what did Jesus do for me and what has he called me to do today, am I going to be too afraid to do it or am I going to do it and get to experience the joy knowing that he doesn't need me to do it. He's
Mhm.
going to accomplish his purposes, whether I say yes or no. But
Mhm.
yeah, I find a lot of comfort in that because of course we all do a bad job.
Well, and trusting that God's going to provide to the need. I mean, that's something we talk a lot about here at the sisterhood is that we don't have what we need until we need it. Like God gives to the need in the present moment. I feel like
Yeah.
that's the thread I heard in your story was
Mhm.
God was giving to that need in the moment of what he was calling you to do.
Mhm.
And you stepping out in faith. I mean, that's when God meets us, right? We step out in faith and God meets us with what we need.
Mhm.
But often we don't have it before we step out in faith. He
Yep.
empowers us while we are walking, while we are moving toward that. And
Yep.
so I love that visual. I would love to hear what is the difference between perfection and excellence, because I think we are called to be excellent in what we're doing. Um, and yet there's a line there. So what is that line?
I think the difference, I just think of man looks at the outward appearance, the Lord looks at the heart. And I think it is, I think it's the difference is a heart posture. I think you can look on the outside like you are pursuing excellence for the sake of making the name of the Lord great. And in your heart, it's all about you, And that was me for a long time. I didn't even know it. I just knew I was miserable. I think that we can look at stuff in scripture like the fruit of the spirit and think, do I have that? And if I don't, maybe I don't even realize that I am living for my own glory, which is what the enemy did. The enemy wanted the glory for himself. And we can even make good things into that. So I think that the line is, I think it's just living a quiet life before the Lord and disciplining yourself to not neglect, um, the spiritual disciplines. Like, don't stop praying, don't stop reading His Word, even though you've read it a million times since you were little. Don't stop bringing your sin into the light and confessing it to other believers so that you may receive mercy. Um, what is it? He who conceals his transgressions will not prosper, but if you confess, you receive mercy. Proverbs 28:13. I know that reference because that was a life changing verse that the Lord used when I was stuck in sin. Um, I think that the line is just we're all going to fail and we're all going to, find ourselves under the China blanket repenting again. But we don't need to despair when we remember that it's not about us. And so I think the Holy Spirit gives us the grace to do that. And none of us can have perfectly pure motives, But if we're pursuing worshiping the Lord, we are naturally going to pursue excellence in our homes and in our families and churches. I tell my oldest all the time, like, and she's, again, perfectionist, but if you get so caught up on all the little details, I mean, it's basically like we're enslaved to the law again, you know, loving the Lord with all our heart, soul, and mind, loving others as ourselves. Like, if we can just focus on that, we will. It's just amazing to like look back and see how God directs our paths, you know?
Because I think for those of us who are prone to perfectionism because of internal stories that we tell ourselves, beliefs that we have about our value, that we need to prove our worth, that then having pure motives becomes the next thing that we can try to be perfect at. And it then it's just this cycle of, so I want to make sure listeners heard you say, our motives will never be 100% pure. Like this side of heaven, we're working towards being holy, but we're not going to have 100% pure motives, and to give ourselves grace in that, and to recognize and that it's a refining process where we won't arrive this side of heaven, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying.
That's so great. And just giving other people that grace, you know, it's hard. It's hard. It's like, you know, we want that for ourselves, but we also expect it and want it from other people. Of course, all of us want to do life with and serve with people who have pure motives, you know, but we have to, you know, if we're holding the gospel up to every person and everything in our lives, it makes us so much more merciful, and it makes us so much more patient. Because we remember and that's the whole point of my new book. I am the chief of sinners. You know, when Paul said that, you look at his life when he was writing that and you're like, oh my goodness, you've given everything. You've been imprisoned. You know, but he remembers his sin. And when he was Saul the persecutor, and he knows that even in his, you know, saved state, what does he say? I do the things I hate, and the things that I want to do, I don't do. And so I think just having that self-awareness, and even knowing, like we've been talking about, that our humility can turn to pride so easily, that makes us more humble, which is the whole thing we need to know God, is to be humble.
Have there been some writers or some resources that you feel like have really led you, or just been an example for you in that posture?
Oh yeah. Tim Keller, huge. I still listen to his sermons all the time and read his stuff. The Prodigal God was a very transformative book for me. Yeah, honestly, like my whole, you know, you could call it, quote, gospel awakening. I was already a Christian, and what led to my ministry was just having this understanding of what the gospel means for everyday life. And it's not just this hope for someday. And I didn't learn that from a prominent writer. I learned it from a pastor's wife named Elizabeth in a room. She's not my friend. I don't know her. I was just in a room with her at a retreat. And she just kind of laid out what her home looks like, and how her goal is not to be the perfect mom and the perfect everything. It's to point her family to the gospel in her successes and in her failures. And this was stuff I'd been learning I was a Bible college graduate at this time. Like I was like a, quote, professional Christian, you know, and just the way that she explained her goals as a human, as a Christian, I was like, oh my goodness, I have been doing it all wrong. And this is why I don't have the joy and the peace, because I have been pursuing excellence for myself. And I don't think it was entirely that. Like I think a lot of it was, I really did want to please God. I didn't want him to say, depart from me, I never knew you. But I had this earner mentality where even in my more pure moments, I would want to earn God's love. And you can't, you know. I think of the rich young ruler, and him saying, what do I have to do? And then God saying, sell everything you have and follow me. And I used to read that and think, oh no, like I have some stuff, you know, like how, and it wasn't that. It was that God could see his heart. And we have to have hearts that are humble and dependent. And that's kind of really hard, but it's also kind of really easy. It's so easy that my 7-year-old figured it out, you know, when she accepted Jesus this year. And that's so beautiful that the Bible tells us, children, the faith of a child, that's what it takes to enter the kingdom of heaven. So
Hmm. It gets back to what you said about Christian community, that you were just in a room with a
Yeah.
woman who
Mhm.
was just sharing. And that really was a shift for you. That was a defining moment for you. And so it does get back to part of our journey. It's so important to be in various Christian community,
Yeah.
whether that is in a church or a small group, or you're involved in, different nonprofits that are faith-based.
Definitely. Yeah. I love that. And I mean, and my adoption story is similar. I can think of the names of the people that I sat next to, and they didn't say, why aren't you serving in orphan care ministry? They didn't say that to me one time. They were just studying the Bible next to me, and I was watching their lives, and I was in their living room every Monday. And it's like God used them, Maddie and Justin, to nudge us toward that call that he had on our lives. So yeah, I would say I might put so much, I mean, the Bible puts so much importance into it, but personally, I put so much importance into community, because I think we're either wired to, of course, because we're humans and we're all messed up. We're either wired to like cling to community and be extroverted and get me all the people because I want to fill myself with validation from people, or we can be more like me and tend to be more of a hermit. So it's like, you know, God calls us to the messy, hard relationships that will transform us. We need each other. We need to borrow each other's faith. And yeah.
Yeah, that circles back to what we were talking about at the beginning, that even good things can be used as a way to mask dealing with the underlying issues. And community, we can go to those places to be distracted so that we don't have to deal with what's going on in here. And so it's knowing ourselves enough to say, how am I using this for my benefit and for my growth? And how am I maybe using it as a way to escape from what I really need to be dealing with here?
Yeah, that's really good. And how do we know ourselves? By our fruit, is what the Bible says. So, I think that, and I've done this, I've gone down a rabbit hole of self-examination, and that leads us back to self, but I think that when we are pursuing the one singular, God, when we are pursuing him, he, like in China, he's the one who exposed he's the one who reveals to us who we are, and we see how little it's how very much it's not about us.
Okay, so Scarlett, as we are headed into this new year and people have all these New Year's resolutions, as they always do, as we always do, and they are saying, I want to do these things well and I want to focus on these, but how do we right size our expectations so that we're not striving toward perfection?
That's great. I love the book Hoping for Happiness by Barnabas Piper. Your question has reminded me of that, because expectations is such a huge thing. I think we can't be happy if we're expecting, I'm going to lose 10 pounds by March, whatever it is. Yeah, you're right. The right size expectations. I don't want to say I don't believe in New Year's resolutions. I don't not believe in them. But I've just been so, it has not worked for me. Like I've been so the stereotype of entering into a new year of striving towards something that I'm going to fail at, and then I'm going to beat myself up, and then I'm going to give up, and then I'm going to watch stand-up comedy on Netflix, and so I just, my Bible reading changed a ton when I didn't stop doing Bible studies or organized things. I kept that, but I added unhurried time in God's word, where it was like, I do not need to finish this by December. I'm just going to read through the Bible. Whatever else I'm doing, great with my community. But I'm also going to have this time where I just say, Lord, speak to me in this. That has been so transformative. And I can think already, and I have it written in my Bible, of so many times he prepared me for something difficult that was to come from something I read 2 months before, just in my quiet, alone, time in his word. So I would say the thing I strive to do now is to see my relationship with the Lord as a gift, and to not neglect that. And man, totally, if you're the type that loves lists and doesn't become enslaved to them, then do that. But for me, I think I too easily would get enslaved by them. And so I keep it really simple, and talk to me in 10 years. Maybe I'll say something totally different. Yeah, that's my answer.
Thank you, Scarlett, so much. I just,
Oh. Well, Scarlett, I think as we are heading into the rest of January and 2023, what are some final words of encouragement that you have for women as they are considering their new year? And often there are goals connected to that. And so we don't want to discourage that, because we want to encourage people to grow. And I like what you just said about tending to the gift of the relationship. Do you have any final word other than that for our listeners?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Definitely not trying to discourage anyone from, God calls us all to do different things, and whatever helps you in your pursuit of him, for sure. I mean, being organized and having a plan is an awesome thing. And it's not that I don't have a plan, but I would just say my last word would be to just have the freedom to, ask the Lord, what does this look like in my life? I want to be more like you. I want that to be my singular focus. Help me in the details, and show me what will help me, and help me to have people around me that are going to help me with that pursuit. I'm totally pro that. So listeners, not pro goals, not anti goals here. But yeah, I would just say, don't lose focus of this simple mission that we have to know God and accept and enjoy his love and forgiveness every day, and extend that to other people. The older I get, the more I see, oh man, it really is simple, and he really does do what he says he's going to do. And the joy and the peace thing that he promises us is it's not just a hope, like it's real. So yeah. That's it.
I'd say that's good. Let's not overcomplicate the lives that he's given us with all of those goals. But remember, it's right sizing. It's back to right
Goals are
sizing.
great. Yeah.
It's putting them in their proper place.
Yes.
And remembering that they are good for us as long as they're good for us.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, Scarlett, thank you so much. Where can people find you and your books as they are headed into 2023?
You can find me on Instagram, Scarlet Hiltibidal. You can find me at you'retheworstpersonintheworld.com, scarlethiltibidal.com. Hard last name, so you'retheworstpersonintheworld.com might be an easier search.
I get that. Yeah.
Oh, yes. You have a hard last name too. I'm looking at it
Yes.
right now.
Yes.
I'm not going to, hold on. How do you say it? I'm not even going to try.
Well, we pronounce it Kirkendall, as if there's an R.
Okay.
Yeah, but not everybody who spells it that way does.
Kirkendall.
So I'm not saying there's a right way or a wrong way, though my husband would. I'm just saying that's how we pronounce it. But I get the whole, find me at my name. It's a little difficult sometimes.
We might be tied.
Mm-hmm.
My name has too many I's and L's and T. Yeah.
I was looking at it as I was writing it out today, and I was thinking, okay, this is the way you remember it. It's all I's until the A at the end.
There you go. Oh, it's great. I should say that.
Okay. Well, Scarlett, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thank you for having me.
Happy New Year, Scarlett.
Thank you, Krista.
Bye.
Bye.